Everyone knows the classic movie monsters that have permeated pop culture for decades. As famous as they are, what might be lesser known are the true stories that influenced the creatures you know. Today, we discuss the origins of Dracula, Wolfman, and Gill-man as we dive into 3 famous movie cryptids. This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force, to Red Web. It's a Mystery Monday, so you know we got to uncover something else. I'm Trevor Collins. With me, as always, Alfredo Diaz.
Oh, dang, we're doing it.
We're diving in.
I believe I suggested this one in the middle of one of our episodes.
Yeah. So now we have an official excuse to call ourselves officially official, a movie podcast about mysteries.
Go ahead and double stamp official on that.
Triple stamp it.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is just Task Force. If this is your first episode of Red Web, this is a little bit different than our normal hoopla, where we walk through a new mystery every single week and Fredo reacts to it. This one is a good excuse for us to get ready for the October season because we are doing a whole month on ghosts and hauntings.
Here. Spooky season right around the corner.
Yeah.
Grab your pumpkin spice lattes.
I almost got one this morning just to dust it off, you know? But I'm not super into it personally.
I've maybe had one in a decade.
Yeah. That's enough for me.
All right.
It's not bad. It's just not my preferred. But yeah, so today, Fredo and I are diving in together, kind of going into this blind, learning about the actual stories that inspired these 3 well-known. I mean, Gill-man maybe a little less so, but Wolfman and Dracula, probably S tier. Everyone knows or have heard of them. So let's dive into that. But before we do, I'm super stoked on this. Today, we just filmed it, but it's coming out for you, Task Force, this week, September 22nd.
Buckle up.
Case Files, a new show from Red Web on our YouTube channel and on the Rooster Teeth app, where we get hands-on with the cases that we discuss on this podcast. It's a variety, so every week we do something different. Sometimes we discuss fan theories. What else we got?
Sometimes we're testing out equipment that we use on the field. Other times, maybe we want to figure out what Bigfoot would smell like, hypothetically.
Absolutely.
You know, so we're going to be tackling a whole bunch of different things. We always said on this show, the more you support us, the more we can do.
Yes.
And this is just as tangible as that can be possible.
Right.
Of like, boom, you know, we got a little set. We got multiple cameras.
We got a squonk.
I
don't know why we both went into that.
There is a squonk. Yeah, we both dove into that voice head first. But it's just, you know, it's another thing on top of the, you know, podcast that we already do.
Absolutely.
So you guys wanted more Red Web. You showed your support, and we're bringing more.
You came out, Task Force. You showed up. So thank you very much. And with that, we have 8 fantastic episodes ready for you. We're going to do an 8-week run. I think we're going to keep the show seasonal for now, unlike this show.
Right.
But again, depending on how things go, we want to keep expanding this Red Web universe.
Yeah.
So maybe it'll become weekly at some point. I don't know. But we're starting out with fan theories as submitted by you. We had some really good ones. So go ahead and put that in your calendars. This Thursday, September 22nd, every week after that for 8 weeks total. Very excited.
You're ready.
Ooh, and then we got Ghost Month too. Oh man. All right. So with that said, let's you and I together dive into the history and starting with Dracula, because I think, you know, you and I might both know a little bit about these characters. But I'm eager to dive into this with you, kind of
the
fresh.
The character that inspired Count Chocula.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's the other way around, but that's okay. Count Chocula came first, but all right. Dracula. The infamous Count Dracula has haunted books, shows, and movies that people have loved for years, if not centuries. Before Dracula and vampires, Romania and nearby regions like Transylvania have told legends of what they called the Strigoi, S-T-R-I-G-O-I. Strigoi were said to be undead creatures that returned to feed on the blood of the living. They slept during the day and could turn into animals such as dogs or birds. So you're already seeing the beginnings of something familiar, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of parallels here to what we know as like vampires as a whole, bloodsuckers,
blood-sucking nocturnal animaguses.
You know, but also there's a lot of deviations from what like I know them as in Hollywood, right? Like I'm sure in some movies this happens, but I've known them just to change into vampires. Vampires are changing to vampires.
It's time to disguise myself.
So,
You just got real pale.
right.
And you know, it's huge widow's
now
peak
you
for
got
some
big
reason.
bangs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my disguise. Bats, right?
Yes.
It's just like that's the main thing, and I feel like majority of what when you see them, they are like bats. Sure, sometimes you see them as a wolf or what.
I've only ever seen them as bats. So it's interesting that we have the strigoi here, kind of setting the scene as turning into birds and dogs.
But I would say like majority of the time, it's like they turn into bats. Like that's what they do. There isn't like in the movie where it's like they could turn into any animal.
Right.
So that's interesting to know that that's kind of where it's coming from. And at least initially, from what you're telling me, it's like these are undead that are back to life.
Something that had passed away and come back.
Kind of a little bit into the zombie-ish realm with, which some of the lore does go into that. But the point I'm trying to get at here is we're not like tying it right into, at least initially right now, into just Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, right?
An individual.
Right. It's not like this individual that spawned all of these, like, it's just like, no, like these are creatures.
It's an idea or something that exists. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Interestingly enough, and now before I continue, Task Force, I want you to mentally unpack everything you know about vampires, because of course we know some of those things, but catch this. With regards to strigoi specifically, to ward them off, people ate lots of, you guessed it, garlic. And they even wore it and sometimes decorated their doors with it to ward this creature away. People who lived criminal lifestyles or had unorthodox burials could become strigoi after death. So it was almost like a moral story to say, live a straight-laced life, don't do wrong by others, and also respect the dead and bury them properly, or you might have this terror on your hands. They might return to seek vengeance or something.
That being said, I think like if a vampire would try to attack us, right? Well, I mean, first
they can try. We're set. Dude.
We'd be screwed.
I'm just gonna let you know I soaked all the drywall in garlic oil.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
The task force headquarters has a rank smell to it. And if you were wondering, that's what it has been.
You're wondering why it's drippy.
Yeah.
And then why it smells. But like, I feel like we'd be screwed because we wouldn't know, first off, what to do. And initial instinct would be to do things that we saw in the movies, right?
Right.
And it just imagine us being like, well, you can't come in and didn't invite you. And you just go, I don't care. I don't need an invite. Like, who told you that?
Like, wait a minute. That's
right. You're like, well, hold on.
What do they bait you? You go to the door. You're like, oh my God, that's a vampire. And you're like, I'm not going to let you in. And then they just jump on you, bite you right in the neck.
Right.
Juices go flowing everywhere.
Done.
I did like, just as a total aside, by the way, is of what we do in the shadows.
Great show.
Really leaning into some of
show.
those tropes about vampires and having a good time with it. But all right, let's get back to it. The first documented case of a strigoi and of a vampire in general, right, occurred in a village in Croatia. Jur Grando passed away in 1656, and he haunted the village for 16 years after his death. It was said that if Grando knocked on your door, you'd be dead within days. Grando's haunting ended after locals decided to team up against him and chopped his head off. Boom, done.
Whoa. Yeah, that's enough to piss someone off to come back.
1656. That's not as far back as I would have guessed, but that's a heck of a time for
it's far enough for me
folklore,
Yeah, I mean, it's far enough for a tale like this to exist.
Yeah.
It's not something I think that would be like in the 1800s.
It's like in that awkward lull where not much in history is happening.
Yeah.
Inventions kind of paused.
Right.
And so, evil creatures of the night started creeping out. But there are similar legends of vampiric beings happening all over the world akin to this story, but this is well known as the first of its kind. And it's so interesting how, yes, the head lop off is not a stake to the heart, but it's so interesting to me how true to the origin the stories maintain to this day. Now, the character of Dracula seems to be loosely based on a Romanian prince from the 1400s, so earlier on now.
Wow.
Vlad Tepes, also known as Vlad the Impaler and Vlad Dracula. The original novel, Dracula, was written by Bram Stoker in 1897, and Stoker's notes don't mention Vlad the Impaler directly. Tepesh was known for torturing, mutilating, mass murdering, disemboweling, decapitating, or boiling or skinning his victims alive. Not a great person by any means. And while a very real person, his very heinous acts are what kind of attached him to this folklore to create this character we all know. Now, before I continue in my notes, I'm just kind of going off the cuff here. I've also heard of whether he did this individually and privately or he did this kind of secretly. I heard that he's also fed guests of the blood of some of his victims. And that's where imbibing the blood comes from with regards to Vlad.
Well, yeah, I can see how they ran crazy with like the whole tying vampires to, Vlad, Dracula, etc. The dude was insane as it was already.
Now, my question is, why do they have to make such a heinous person so well known that his name is known throughout the ages? Why couldn't they find like Daisy Flower Picker who leaves a tulip in your door handle every night? Like, why couldn't they make her well known for the rest of time?
Because then we wouldn't be talking about it.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
I woke up to a tulip under my pillow.
They fancified this really terrible person.
That's true. I mean, I guess what sticks with you more than fear, right?
Right.
The most primal of the emotions.
And the Underworld trilogy.
Oh, God, what a good movie. All right. Would you Lycan or vampires? Anyway, let's move on. Amongst these gruesome punishments, though, his preferred method was, to his namesake, impalement, by driving a wooden stake through the victims' bodies and leaving them to die of exposure. Vlad supposedly liked to dine among the bodies of his victims and would even dip his bread in their blood. So there it is.
Oh my God.
There it is. Now, in place of his father's title of Dracul, meaning the devil, Vlad adopted the name of Dracula, meaning son of the dragon. Tepesh's horrifying behaviors and birthplace of Transylvania convinced many that Vlad Tepes may have inspired the tale of Dracula. Some historians disagree, but the similarities are very strong.
I mean, it's the name is historical actions.
I think even being a prince, Count Dracula is pretty commonly the title that you hear.
I didn't know you said Dracula was like a dragon.
Yeah. So Dracula meaning son of the dragon, and Dracul specifically, just dropping the A, means the devil.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah. I had heard of Dracul, but I never really knew the English kind of translation of those. Stereotypical descriptions of Dracula and other vampires are a little bit different than kind of what we talked about with the Strigoi, but they are said to be a tall, old person, clean-shaven, and it was usually a masculine figure, but it doesn't always have to be. Clean-shaven, save for a long white mustache, and clad in black from head to foot, without a single speck of color about him anywhere, which is where you get the modern iteration, the black slicked back hair, the gaunt, pale,
the goth look they usually have.
Yeah.
The modern version is the Hot Topic look.
The only thing different about that would then be the cape having that accent of red on the inside. I think that's just a bit of flair, but otherwise completely
stylish.
Yeah, stylish Dracula, but otherwise completely desaturated, as it were. Now, Stoker's Dracula had, quote, a large, bushy Victorian mustache, dense, curly hair, bushy eyebrows, and peculiarly sharp white teeth, especially the canine teeth, which is where the fangs come in the modern iteration. Now, Dracula's appearance wasn't the only contradictory trait to other vampire descriptions. Stoker's Dracula was able to walk in sunlight, unlike most modern depictions. So there are a few differences here, this one being a huge one. And then with regards to the story, the book itself, one of the characters in the book received a garlic bouquet to put on her door in order to prevent the arrival of Dracula and being kind of hunted. Now, Stoker's story introduced the idea of vampires being able to transform into bats, and so maybe that's what kind of popularized it there in the late 1800s.
He really popularized a couple things. Bats, and the fangs, right?
The fangs, maybe not the mustache, but rather the kind of gaunt, pale nature of Dracula. But otherwise, like the walking in sunlight kind of fell away. I guess in the mustache, just moved on with time.
Yeah.
Just like,
It's
not the style anymore.
Wait, if like they were putting rings of garlic on their door, who's to say Dracula couldn't just get a big stick to like lift it off and throw it away?
He's just like 10 foot away with a pole going, ugh, oh God.
Get you.
It depends. What's the radius of that thing? And then my question is, Christian, I don't know, do we know this? Like, when did the let the right ones in piece come into play? Like the invitation.
Right.
Was that kind of a, hey, garlic is kind of in tight supply, or maybe only the wealthy can get it during these particular centuries? So maybe that then became part of the story.
That's a good question. Let me
But also as well, it's like, say I couldn't be close to it because of the radius of the garlic smell or whatever. It's like, hey, random stranger, you want to make a quick coin?
Right.
Can you just go grab that off real quick?
Right.
Take it with you. Get some garlic.
Boom. Easy.
Right.
Someone
Someone put
my
this
neighbor.
on my
I don't
door.
steal.
I mean,
You
I
know?
feel like you just pay someone.
Right. That, or you
could
do, again, coming back to a more modern vampire thing, you make them your thrall. You make them your mind puppet, and you enchant them to go do your bidding on your behalf. So at this point, now there's only a few more notes to kind of uncover, but at this point we've got the Strigoi, which seems to be the folklore at the epicenter of this, this creature. And then you have the real life entity of Vlad the Impaler, and what seems
a lot of similarities.
Now, what really seems to be getting laid down here. Now, of course, many historians do have disagreements over these things, but when it comes to Bram Stoker's iteration, it seems like he's combined the two to base it more in the cultural feels of the people in the area of Eastern Europe, while also attaching some elements of a real individual who was infamous for his criminal behavior, to create this very fearful entity that could then haunt the minds of now Western culture. And so you almost have two separate origins that merged thanks to Stoker's iteration, and that's where this is coming from. Because then, as Christian continues to kind of maybe look into the garlic and the invitational piece, with regards to the Strigoi, I mean, they also drank blood, as we talked about, and to embellish that piece of the story a little more, when they drank the blood of their victims, they would gain the energy of that person. And it's a practice now we commonly associate with vampires, like, which wasn't necessarily heavily a part of it, but yeah, they gain the energy. It isn't just strictly to stay alive, like that's the only source of food I can get, but I'm also trying to like just suck your soul out kind of thing, like drain you of your spiritual energy.
Your essence.
So now we have the shape-shifting from the Strigoi, the blood drinking, the garlic.
Yeah, the Strigoi stuff is insane, because I've only known the origin of Dracula from Vlad.
Right,
I didn't know it was more so the Strigoi.
Yeah, that's so interesting to me. I love folklore, and so I love when I can find, an entity like this that I've never heard of that's so well known. Yeah, so with regards to the invitation, Christian, what you got there?
So the first thing that I was able to find is from a book in the 17th century. It was published in 1645. It translates to On the Beliefs of the Greeks by Leo Alatius. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing that. But he was a Greek scholar and theologian, and he was keeper of the Vatican Library. But in this book, he talks about the concept of, once again, apologies on pronunciation, vrikolakas, which is a Greek folklore creature that is very, very similar to vampires. And it's in that book where he explains that vrikolakas have the invitation aspect of their story. Is the first, supposedly, that I can find recorded mention, but it's believed that it goes even further back. So
I wouldn't be surprised, but that's a pretty strong like anchor in time. And you also mentioned something that also kind of trickles around some vampiric stories, which is the relationship to religion, specifically Catholicism or Christianity. And so now we have a scholar, a Greek scholar, who's the keeper of the Vatican Library, obviously the Catholic library, now writing about a creature very, very similar. Yeah, so that's so interesting.
I think it's what's fascinating about this is that it seems like a lot of it was pulled from different lores and different tales and stories, which is
but some are overlapping,
which some overlap. but it's a common practice, but this was done so long ago,
Yeah.
right? As opposed to a little bit more modern times where people just go, from this and then from this, and then I'll make this. But just like way back then, they didn't have the internet, social media, but they're all talking about these similar creatures or something.
Yeah.
Like
That's so interesting. And like, I imagine that these creatures must have had an even darker, eerier aura to them, because now we're kind of normalized to the stereotypical traits that you know of a vampire.
Right.
You've seen it popularized in Hollywood, the fangs, the flying, the capes, the stake through the heart, all that.
Like so much more terrifying, right? We're
Yeah,
all
more real.
desensitized. We're like, oh, we've seen the fangs, we see the blood. We're not seeing it in something that is with vampires, seeing it with movie monsters, all that kind of stuff. And so like back then, like these tales must have like shaken people to their core.
Oh yeah. It reminds me of, and that's kind of the end of Dracula here as we kind of move on to Gill-man. But just to your point, like it reminds me of when I was a child, my cousin would make up scary stories about this entity that lived in the woods behind my old house. And like as a kid, you don't really have a method for desensitizing yourself to that. You don't have a way to prove it or otherwise. And so you can now imagine something like this that we get to enjoy as entertainment. You can still be scared by it, of course, but you're a little bit more normalized to it. Whereas even just a century or two ago, people are telling these stories and it really can get under your skin and become a lifelong fear. And I even think about like Pennywise when I was a kid. There was a summer where I was kind of scared to jump in the shower just because I hadn't seen the movie yet, but my friend described the shower scene where he like starts coming out of the shower heads and stuff. And I'm just like, ugh. It's just, I just love that part of this is just kind of the suspension of disbelief and throwing your mind back into the past where this came from is, it's just exactly what I wanted, which is getting ready for the holiday season of Halloween.
Yep. I think its background, again, I'll reiterate this, but it's so much more clouded than I thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be like, we focus on Vlad and then there's a tale from this person or from this part of the country, etc. But it's like, no, it's like different pieces pieced together from different areas.
Yeah. I'm really glad, Christian, that you pulled up the invitation thing. Cause like, that's an interesting part that kind of comes out. I hadn't been thinking about that, but all right, let's move on now to Gill-man. We'll kind of table Wolfman for a hot second. Now, Gill-man, I know very little about. This reminds me of like Shape of Water sort of entities, which not always so sinister, but let's dive in.
Not as popular too.
Not as popular.
Really see him. I mean, if anything, the more popular version is like Swamp Thing.
Swamp Thing, or the movie that we're going to refer to here, The Creature from the Black Lagoon. I'm sure many people have heard of that. Maybe not.
Even then,
it,
it's just like, when's the last time anyone's really talked about that, or you seen a movie about it, or like
Now there's some catfish tangents we could take here,
as
but I'll
always,
leave those on
because they're the most deadly.
But I'll leave that on the table for now. The infamous creature known as Gill-man is reportedly inspired by legends of amphibious beings, which take many different shapes and forms. Of course, you even have mermaids and whatnot. But with regards to this, William Holland, the producer of the film The Creature from the Black Lagoon, met with cinematographer Gabriel Figueroa at a party in 1941. Now, Figueroa told Holland about a Brazilian myth, half-human, half-fish being called the Yakaruna. A friend of Figueroa's was filming a documentary in the Amazon, the center, I feel like, of so many potential myths and legends. So much left to be uncovered over there.
I feel like if you're talking about like, granted, the sea, mysteries galore. If you're talking about like what's the equivalent of that on land, Amazon.
Oh yeah. I mean, just factually, there are still species being discovered there to this day. So fascinating to me. I love that. But anyway, they were filming a documentary in the Amazon on these creatures and reportedly disappeared during that production. While filming a documentary on this
like the
Yakaruna, some people disappeared.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Like they were there for filming that.
Yes.
I thought it would be like they're there filming other stuff and then they saw that.
No, I guess it was specifically to look into the Brazilian myth of this half human, half fish. So that's so fascinating. So the Yakaruna is a god said to live deep in the waters in their own city, upside down from those on land. Now, you can start to anchor
Whoa.
this in European myths of like Atlantis and even Hollow Earth a little bit.
Right.
But
yeah.
this is said to be underwater
but upside.
and a mirrored version of what we've got.
Whoa.
Yeah.
This is fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
I have no clue.
I'm off literally the deep end and I'm loving it. So the Yakaruna can appear as people with misshapen feet and a backwards head, or as a river dolphin. So basically, whether it was out of stoking fear, spreading warnings, or just what have you, they're anchoring this myth now in reality. Like if you see a river dolphin heading into the Amazon, you might be inclined to say that's not just a normal dolphin, that could be Yakaruna. And this could be to prevent kids from maybe going swimming in a very dangerous river.
Interesting that's upside down. That's such a weird detail.
Yeah. I
It
love it
exists,
though,
but
because like
upside down.
it's so visual. Like you go deep underwater and under that, almost like gravity inverts. And so,
Right. The science behind it is fascinating.
yeah, like they'd be swimming upside down. But there's more, now that you have the backwards head and the misshapen feet when they appear as humanoid. So now you have, not only are they upside down, but they have backwards
attributes as well.
Yeah. They have also been described as hairy beings with their heads turned backwards, sometimes riding what appears to be a black crocodile. And,
I have heard of none of this ever my entire life.
oh man, I have some photos, very interesting photos. Not photos, art that depicts what this creature would look like if seen.
Whoa.
Obviously, as he takes this in, task force at RedWebPod. Check us out on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, the whole spread if you want to see what we're talking about as well.
They look like warriors a bit.
Yeah,
they're ready for an engagement.
yeah.
fight.
So they have these long fin-like ears, almost elvish, if you wanted to kind of describe it that way,
I
but
see that.
long and pointy, fins coming off the forearms and biceps, very muscular, lean, humanoid for sure, webbing between the hands and toes, but otherwise kind of like a very humanoid aquatic entity.
Yeah, it's what you think like Gillman looks like
Yeah.
for sure. Shape of water, as you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
That type of feel.
Now, the Yakaruna can transform, it is said, into handsome men, and is also said to abduct female victims on land to become Yakaruna in the depth of the water, basically converting then human
so they
women.
They can transform humans into them.
Yeah. And that
Whoa.
transformation is said to be irreversible, and many disappearances in the area of Brazil are blamed on the Yakaruna, that people are being taken into the water and made to be a part of their civilization.
This is very elaborate.
Oh yeah. Figueroa's recount of the Yakaruna legend inspired Alan to develop a movie with Universal. The creature from the Black Lagoon is most likely about the indigenous legends of the water people of the Amazon, the Yakaruna. So now you kind of know, if you've seen that movie, where this origin comes from. The creature in the film does not share the supernatural abilities of the Yakaruna, but there are a number of references to this very legend. Unfortunately, while this is a movie podcast about mysteries, and this time cryptids, I haven't seen this movie, at least not
I
recent
have
enough
not.
to
No way.
pull on it. I remember seeing the original The Mummy and Nosferatu and stuff like that at my uncle's place because he has a
Mhm.
large collection of old horror movies. So I'm sure I have seen it.
Yeah.
It's just not in my memory banks.
Man, I was excited for Universal to start the MonsterVerse.
I know.
I was like, that's gonna be so cool.
Instant fumble.
Like, yeah.
What do they
It's like
say? Fumble at the 99-yard line?
Yeah, it was supposed to be like the dark universe.
Man, that would have been so
it
cool.
would have been sick, but
Yeah.
yeah, they fumbled it hard.
Well, maybe give them a little like sabbatical and they'll come back to it.
Right.
But now, for those of you like ourselves who haven't seen the movie, some of the references that are included in the film are like the set being on the Amazon River. Gill-man's interest in Kay, the female protagonist of the film, resembles the Yakaruna's infatuation with human females. And Gill-man abducted Kay and took her to his lair, which is a network of underground caves. Again, very similar to the idea of aquatic
Right.
cities underneath the water in the legend. So, not too much more to say about that. It is a more linear path between the folklore and the common known entity of Gill-man versus Dracula. But
I do like
fascinating.
I like that it was very straightforward.
Yeah.
It doesn't like deviate too much. It's like, this is the lore. This is what's been told for generations. And this is kind of just like what's believed. You know what I mean?
It's more true to this one legend as opposed to maybe a few samples from a couple
with,
different
Dracula.
places. Mm-hmm. But
less believable as an overall creature.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like, as opposed to like Dracula, who I think was probably a person that drank blood, right? If someone likes blood, that's like maybe messing around with the blood a little bit.
I like to dabble.
Just dabbled in it.
Yeah.
And so like these fanciful stories were created off of those actions. But
yeah.
with this, it's just, I feel like this is very much like a tale. Like people went missing and no one can understand how or why. And then they're like, well, it's because these creatures. This
feels very much like a cautionary tale or a legend that's passed down to say, listen, the waters here are dangerous because they are. They move fast, they're very deep, they're very broad. There's a lot of creatures in it that can just do you in, like crocodiles, alligators, whichever are more indigenous, I don't know. Insects, piranha, snakes, the whole shebang. Hippopotamus.
Oh,
I mean,
they're probably,
again, I don't know actually the zoological spread of the Amazon specifically, but these are all water creatures that could do you in like lickety split. Yeah. So this is kind of like a cautionary tale to kids to not go trouncing around. But you're right. I think there's something to the vampire. Like there are people today that drink blood, not as their only source of sustenance, but because they are self-proclaimed vampires and it's just part of what they do as a group or their beliefs.
Interesting.
And so, so you can imagine in a less science-forward time where people knew a little less about the world, you might be inclined to see that as a, woo, what's going on there? That's terrifying. Let's tell a story about it. Hey everybody, it's Trevor here to talk to you directly about the stuff going on in Red Web. We just launched Red Web Case Files, the show that complements the podcast that you've all known and loved. It gets hands-on with the theories, with the spooky natural stuff that happens on social media, all the ghost videos that we can react to. We have a PowerPoint debate between the catfish and the owl. Which one is more scary? That is coming this week in particular. But this is the show where we get to kind of engage with you all. You guys can send us stuff to react to respond to all that, and then we get to talk right back to you. It's just another way for us to interact with you, the task force, who has shown so much support. So thank you all so much for coming out, rating this podcast 5 stars, and doing all that good stuff. It means a lot, and it helps the show expand. That's why we're able to do this new show. So go subscribe, youtube.com/redwebpod. Never miss an episode. And if you could do us a favor, or as Harley Quinn would say, do us a flavor, hit that like button. It helps bolster us in that algorithm. We got to play the game so Red Web can surface, find more mystery lovers, and keep the train rolling. And with that said, I want to talk about a few sponsors for today. This episode of Red Web is sponsored by HelloFresh. We're getting into the fall season, which means in Texas, at least, the temperatures are finally below 100 degrees.
And it also means fresh fall flavors at HelloFresh.
Ooh, the alliteration. They always have something new on the menu, and they've got something for everyone. So whether you're looking for that family-friendly meal kit, fit and wholesome, or even veggie recipes, their produce travels from the farm straight to your door in less than a week, keeping it nice and crispy.
Man, that's a pretty quick turnaround.
Right? Okay, well, fall is the chance, at least in my mind, to cozy up with some delicious sweets, put on that blanket, enjoy that crisp air. And right now, you can do all that with HelloFresh because they have limited edition, kid-friendly baking kits. I use HelloFresh quite often because it helps me from going to the grocery store. I hate doing that. And so when all the meals come to my door, I can look like a chef. I follow the pictures. Delicious. I like the tortellini that I get. I actually save the recipe so I can have it over and over again. But yeah, I enjoy making that. There's always some for leftovers, so you get to keep enjoying it. I've never been let down. They're always delicious.
I completely agree with you. The fact that I don't need to step out of my house to have all this like cooked and ready to go. I'm just like, I could just make it myself. Totally fine. But I'm gonna need you to calm down because all this talking about food is making me hungry.
Hey, well, it's good that you're hungry because you can go to HelloFresh.com/RedWeb65 and use code RedWeb65 for 65% off plus free shipping. That's again, 65% off with free shipping using code RedWeb65 at HelloFresh.com/RedWeb65. This episode of Red Web is also sponsored by Upside. Inflation is hitting all of us quite where it hurts, right in the pocketbooks, whether that's paying at the gas station or paying $20 to your friend. It all matters, this inflation business. But that's where Upside can step in a little bit and help you out. Upside is an app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out, because with every purchase, you can earn cash back. I've really enjoyed looking at this app because it's so intuitive to use. They have a map of all the locations that you can go to. And like I said, you can get cash back on all of your normal purchases. Everyone's got to eat. Everyone's got to get that gas on, unless you want a bike. But regardless, you can get that cash back on those everyday normal purchases and help soften the blow of that inflation. To use it, you just have to download the free Upside app, claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside, and then you can check in at the business, pay as usual with a credit card or a debit card, and you get cash back. It's fantastic. Download the free Upside app and use promo code REDWEB to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Again, that's at least $5 cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using promo code REDWEB. This episode of Red Web is also sponsored by Celeritas, the wild, new sci-fi thriller podcast. Task Force, do you like your sci-fi dark, gritty, and terrifyingly trippy? Of course you do. I heard all three of those checked boxes. All of your pencils scraping across that paper. Celeritas is about the first test of lightspeed flight gone wrong when it hurls an astronaut deep into space and far into the future. There, he begins a desperate interplanetary search for the remnants of the human race. This show isn't a cute, fun romp in the shiny spaceship that you might expect. No. It's terrifying. Space is hard. Space wants to kill you. Our guy risks everything trying to figure out what happened to humanity while he's battling the very real challenges of radiation exposure, of bone loss, and fuel supplies, all as the isolation slowly drives him crazy. The sound design here is absolutely bananas. The production value is over the top. This is a headphone experience for sure. Celeritas is available on all major podcast platforms or straight from the source at embracetheemptiness.com. So again, check out Celeritas. Go to www.embracetheemptiness.com. Again, that's www.embracetheemptiness.com. And with that, let's dive right back into the mystery. Let's move on now to Wolfman.
Ooh, lichens.
Lichens, lycanthropy.
Man, I'm gonna end up watching either Blade or Underworld tonight.
Underworld was one
Those
of my
jams.
faves. Yeah. Kate Beckinsale though.
Yeah.
Kid me had a big old crush. Adult me also has a crush. Let's just say it. But let's talk about Wolfman. The myths and legends surrounding werewolves, like the Wolfman of the movies, go very far back in history, and it's unknown where the concept specifically originated, but regardless, we know that they exist to this day. Now, I've heard of lycanthropy, but there's also therianthropy, which is the ability to shapeshift from human to animal. Not necessarily specific around wolves or canines, but it's just a more broad term.
Interesting. Again, animals.
Animorphs.
Right. I mean, it's pretty much. I mean,
Yeah.
Was that a Nick? Was it on Nick? I don't know.
Yeah, it was a book series, and it might have been on Nickelodeon.
There was a TV show.
Yeah.
But
You're talking about Nick, our editor. I was like, what? He's not here?
No, not
No,
Nickbot.
no, not Nickbot.
Not the sentient AI that edits our
Animorphs,
episodes.
Christian, educate yourself.
Yeah,
or date yourself.
unless you were like me and you got the books not to read, but to flip the pages and watch the transformation happen in the bottom corner.
Yeah.
Um,
But I mean, like, this is again a little insane too, because I just know it from wolves.
right.
And you're telling me they can transform into what, like a spider, like a snake?
Well, this is how it started, was
Okay.
with the idea that humans could transform into animals in general. But in our case, yes, a wolfman in particular. Now, since this shift is against the main character's will and without his knowledge, they call it lycanthropy because it's an affliction. You get affected by it. In modern iterations, you're bit. Now you have this virus or what have you, this curse. And
full moon hits.
full moon hit.
Woo!
Yep, it all happens without your say-so or perhaps without even your knowledge.
What was it that had really good prosthetic visual effects. Was it American Werewolf in London?
Yeah, that one had good ones.
That was awesome.
Then there's also
The transformation looked great.
the made-for-TV Disney movie where the kid goes to high school and becomes like a werewolf on the basketball team.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's a kid-friendly version.
Yeah. Now, lycanthropy can be found in the Epic of Gilgamesh, written somewhere between 2100 and 1200 BCE, when a woman pursues Gilgamesh after her lover turned into a wolf. In Greek mythology, the legend of the Lycaon, Lycaon, depicts Zeus turning people into wolves, closer to what is found in Wolfman. So I'm basically laying the groundwork here of all the different points of origin that could exist. It's a common trend for people to turn into wolves throughout history and stories.
I didn't realize it was that common.
Yeah.
Now we're bringing Zeus into the mix. Granted,
Listen,
like
when is Zeus not in the mix, man?
when
guy's
is Zeus not making love and
Right.
or becoming an animal
right?
making love?
Or sometimes doing both, becoming a swan
right.
and then having Hercules.
So yeah, this one's a little bit more scattered.
Yeah.
I would say even more so than Dracula.
Definitely. Yeah. Now, I think this might help us center a little bit. So, in the 16th century, the most famous, quote, werewolf now was a man named Peter Stube. He's also sometimes called Peter Stump, or, not even anywhere close, Abel Griswold. In the town of Bedburg, Germany, farmers reported cattle mutilations for weeks, and of course, believed that wolves were the culprit. This is a good time to pause and remember the episode we did on the Skinwalker Ranch, where cattle were being maimed and mutilated. And I mean, also even the chupacabra.
Yeah.
But there was one in particular where there was a wolf that was latched on to the face of a calf, and it got shot twice.
Shot him twice.
Before it just turned and walked off. That feels so much like what we're hearing here.
Could have been a werewolf.
Could have been a werewolf. But it's very similar to this 16th century story. That's so fascinating. Now, with regards to this 16th century story, later, children and young women disappeared overnight or even in the middle of town, causing panic and the belief that perhaps a werewolf was attacking the town of Bedburg. Now, as the story goes, a girl was being attacked by a wolf when suddenly a stampede of cattle came through, and in the process of being chased down by the town, the wolf lost its left paw. Now, in the midst of this chase, because this story feels very scattered, but in the midst of this chase, chasing this wolf out of town, the wolf lost its paw. They then found a wealthy local man named Peter Stube, who also happened to be missing his left hand. And so they're thinking, okay, maybe this wolf that lost its paw in the chase turned back into a man to then play it off and be like, I'm just a guy.
So it could be just a wild coincidence that stemmed the whole like wolves turning,
Absolutely.
Back into men or
Absolutely.
people.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So now during trials against him, Stube confessed to all the attacks and claimed that the devil gave him a belt that would transform him into a wolf.
A belt?
A belt. Now, does the wolf have this belt on?
But like, I would never suspect like the origin of like how the transformation happens wasn't under a full moon. It was because of a belt.
Became like an ability given to the person by the devil
just
for a belt.
On.
Yeah.
Woo. Belt off. I'm good.
Well, now here comes the problem. How do you undo it when you're a dog that doesn't have opposable thumbs? You can't. I can't get this belt off. Now, question, Christian, just to really make sure we clarify this. This 16th century tale of Peter Stube, was it fictional, like a book written, or is this, so to speak, a historical tale that then stemmed the folklore? Was this a real person that kind of...
Yes, he was a real person, and we're going to get into more details of his story, but it's one of those things, kind of like Vlad the Impaler, where the truth kind of informs the folklore.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, but it started to get a little hairy there, where it's hard to separate fact from fiction, like what is embellished and what's not. But anyway, so Stube apparently confessed to these attacks. Now he's I got a belt from the devil.
I'm sure they tortured him to confess.
Right. Like, confess or you're basically guaranteed to be put to death or something. He reported as well that he often ate parts of his victims, but in reality, it is said Stube wore a pelt of a wolf when he committed these crimes. So he wasn't actually transforming into a wolf, but rather wearing the pelt of a wolf and enacting his heinous crimes.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
That's more realistic.
Mm-hmm.
As scattered as is, this seems like it could actually be like truly grounded.
Right. Like it started as
Right? Like the werewolf. Yeah. Why, the werewolf origin being a person that went around murdering people
Exactly.
with a wolf pelt. That makes complete sense.
Right.
And
Like,
then people
this would
just
be my
fancified it.
disguise.
Right.
Yeah.
He turned into a wolf.
Yeah. But yeah, like maybe that was just his his motive. I'm just going to dress up as a wolf, enact these heinous
What do
crimes.
you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, other cases of werewolves during this time could have actually been like this. Just odd cases of serial killers, either like Peter Stube dressing up as wolves to try to kind of muddy the waters
like they talked
of
about.
different animals, or just like all of these things being now lumped in because Peter Stube's case became so fantastic. Like, oh my God, there's a
True.
Wolfman. Maybe all of these murders happening in the area are all
Also,
afflicted wolf people.
yeah, they see bite marks on like a victim. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, maybe there was that wolf. I've heard about this wolf, man.
Right, right. And so, in past episodes, we've talked about how the psychology of these stories can spread and you can have mass hysteria that spread these stories beyond fact. And we talked about that with Mothman being a potential theory. Moving on now, Pierre Bergot and Michael Verdun. In 1521, these two men allegedly swore allegiance to the devil and claimed to have an ointment, now, not a belt, an
Oh, we're
ointment.
getting wow. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, they're lathering themselves up in ointment to turn themselves into wolves. They confessed to murdering several children and were burned to death at the stake. Burning was thought to be one of the few ways to kill a werewolf.
Wow,
This is before
so
silver
the
enters.
silver
Yeah.
bullets come into play.
Yeah,
What else is there aside from silver bullets?
I think that's it. It's like
That's it,
silver,
right? It's just kind of
and then apparently burning is another way. Otherwise, I think maybe beheading them as a human,
right.
getting them while they're a normal person before they can like.
Man, this is like this is different from what I expected. Belt to transform, maybe a pelt, that was wearing that someone wore. Now ointments that change them into like
Right.
not even like necessarily wolves, right? I mean, at this point, wolves, but even before that, it was just creatures, animals in general.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of cool, like knowing some of the tales that spawn these monsters.
Yeah. Now, we've talked now about a few people. There's another person still, a Frenchman, Gilles Garnier, who had a very similar story. And according to a testimony from Garnier in the court, he was in the forest hunting for food for himself and his family when a specter, as his story goes, appeared to him. Specter being a ghost, just to be clear. Now, the specter offered him, again, an ointment that, when applied, would change him into the form of a wolf, making it easier to hunt. So now we have a less sinister means. This guy's not out here trying to kill people. He's just, the devil came to me in the form of a ghost.
Humble beginning,
Right.
But maybe that is a cursed ointment. It's just so funny. It's an ointment that turns me into a wolf.
Yeah. I mean, you got to think, in the 1500s, that 16th century era, what is a common thing? Ointments are there to heal.
True.
Then you have belts and clothes. What else you got?
Look, what if it is? What if the seed was planted that you would turn into a wolf? Hence, like you start getting the wolf pellets or all that kind of stuff. You're wearing like wolf clothing, that kind of stuff, and the ointment just kind of drives you insane.
Yeah. I mean, that plays very well into this particular story because it is said that Garnier, under the effects of the ointment, murdered about 4 children.
Jesus.
Garnier was subsequently found guilty of, quote, crimes of lycanthropy and witchcraft, and was then burned at the stake in 1574. Again, another way to, in their minds, officially kill this cursed entity, this curse, whatever this is, this wolf person. Now, in more recent werewolf accounts, the violent state is often associated with the full moon. A study was conducted at Australia's Cavalry Mater Newcastle Hospital to find whether or not full moon brings out the, quote, beast in many humans. Now, the study found that of 91 violent acute behavior incidents at the hospital between August 2008 and July of 2009, 23% happened during a full moon. And this is per the History Channel. So this, I think, is what has fed that part of the mystery and the tale being kind of merged in with the Wolfman. Now, not this ointment stuff, but it was getting conflated like under the full moon. That's where, okay, this is where the archaic term lunatic comes from. Lunar being of the moon. And that is why people would, in a sense, lose their minds, lose their control.
Right.
And that's where the two kind of that more real side meets the fantastic Wolfman side.
I think about that.
And people lose then control under the full moon and then enact
And
these
then there was
violent things.
they're doing violent actions, and just to say they're not just turning into wolves.
Yeah.
And what have you. I mean, like the moon affects the tides and different various things. Who's to say it doesn't know? Oh, I mean, research has shown that it can affect the
Oddly enough.
the anatomy of a person, which is quite interesting.
Now the question is, to me, I mean, the moon's there every time, whether it's lit up or
what
a
is
new
it about
moon.
the full moon?
Yeah,
Is
whether
a
it's
full
waxing
moon-
or waning, like
Full moon isn't necessarily closer to us. No, it's just more sun shines upon it. Right?
yeah, it's just not cloaked by the Earth's shadow. So to me, it almost makes sense that it's a preconceived thing. Like,
yeah, I agree.
like a why am I thinking? What's the word where you like take a medicine that has no effect?
Placebo.
Yeah, like a placebo effect. Like
Yeah.
if you are keyed in on that, maybe you are more
Right.
inclined to do
I
something.
mean, I see a full moon, and then I, because I've heard
I start
about
howling,
it,
dude.
and yeah, right.
I just
Like,
go for it.
I feel
I put my belt on. I slather myself
Sorry,
in
yeah,
ointments.
ointment and-
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting whether you want to call it placebo effect or not. You're right. Studies have shown, even modern studies, a disproportionate amount happens under that full moon.
I knew that was going to come into play here, talking
Right.
about like werewolves for sure.
Now, with regards to this study and it being at a hospital, there were reports of patients attacking the staff, biting, spitting, scratching them.
Werewolf action.
Kind of werewolf actions. Many of the violent patients were under the influence of drugs or alcohol, so it is worth knowing that. But it's unknown why the presence of the full moon evoked more violent behavior out of these individuals. Researchers have tried to explain this werewolf phenomenon by linking the behavior to medical conditions such as lycanthropy, food poisoning, hypertrichosis, which is a rare genetic disorder causing excessive hair growth. If you've ever seen on Ripley's Believe It or Not is one way I've seen this, but people that have full body hair,
Yeah.
that's what that is. Rabies, hallucinations, possibly caused by hallucinogenic herbs or some sort of paraphernalia like that. But all in all, it does seem that it is more of a modern idea to conflate the historic folklore of the Wolfman and in with this like moon entity. And even back then, it seems like it was just serial killings with a flair,
I agree. It's a goofier start than I thought werewolves would have. It started off being like, okay, this wolf attacked this person, and then we chased them down, and there was a person missing a hand, which the wolf was missing a paw. But then it just started spiraling into ointments and belts. And
Ointments and belts. Yeah, that's so interesting to me. Like, if nothing else, it's kind of a funny fact to share with people at, tea time, to be like, yeah, this like one of the quintessential cryptids of our time, one of the like top tier Hollywood monsters of film, the Wolfman, is kind of based on, in essence, a serial killer that may or may not have worn wolf pelts while committing crimes, who also happened to be missing a hand.
Right.
And was chased out of town by cattle.
Or in some instances, it was two people who were under the influence of ointments.
Yeah. But I mean, that takes us up to today with regards to the Wolfman, but no theories to discuss, just the histories of these well-known cryptids and monsters.
Right. And these are monsters that everyone knows of.
Yeah.
And for some people, they've known for decades, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, to actually know kind of some of the lore behind it
Not what I thought.
No.
Not whatsoever.
Yeah, this was a good one for me to dive in. Normally, I try to pre-prepare and stuff. I really
Right.
enjoyed diving into this one fresh with you because it was just so interesting to hear some of these backstories.
Mhm.
I feel like I thought I knew a lot. I knew about 20% of this.
I knew none of this, and then so like where did the silver came in from, like
Oh, yeah.
Hollywood? Where does the silver come in?
Yeah,
for the
Christian,
werewolves?
before we close out, you want to do a quick cursory glance and see if we can find out on that silver side? Because that's interesting. That's where, as these stories this is just my gut instinct after now hearing these. It feels like the invitational piece of Dracula and vampires was introduced later on, almost,
Right.
and I could guess that like maybe garlic is hard to come by. Like there's a famine with regards to garlic. So for the sake of the story, people needed to add to it so people wouldn't freak out. And maybe,
For me, I'm somewhat on that same
yeah,
parallel. I think that they added these things to further grow interest in their telling of the story.
oh,
You
yeah.
know, where it's like, oh, you've heard about werewolves before, but you've heard about werewolves and how they
Yeah.
don't like silver.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean you don't like silver? It's like,
Oh,
shoot-
let me tell
shoot
ya.
the werewolf with a silver
Now,
bullet.
now I just think of it as like me sitting on my grandpa's knee. He's telling me a story
Right.
because my grandpa was such a storyteller,
Oh, that's awesome.
and him adding this kind of stuff just to get the child to go,
Yep.
oh my God, that's so
Right.
cool. And then it just kind of picked up and
Yeah.
kept going, Fascinating.
That's what I think. I think a lot of the more modern details, or details I would say is more modern because of were discussed
Mm-hmm.
in these origins or potential origins, is just people trying to spice up the story
Yeah.
in their own way.
Yeah. Or it could be like, keep this lucky silver coin with you. Why? Because.
Right.
And you just create some fantastic addition to it behind it, and then it just sticks. I wonder what else is out there that basically was once part of these stories that is now gone.
It's just dropped off.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you whisper its name backwards, it disappears.
True. I
that would
mean,
be
it could have
interesting.
very well been something like that.
Yeah.
Find the name, the origin name of the werewolf. and
Yeah.
say its name, and
Yeah.
then it'll turn back.
Hmm. Anything popping up there, Christian?
Quite a bit, actually.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of theories about where the origin came from. Some people talk about, there's one thing I'm saying that says silver is a metal associated with the moon, and because the moon controls werewolves, there's some correlation there that may have led to where that.
I didn't even
Kind of
think. I did
folklore
not know that.
developed.
Man, I'm learning so much today.
I didn't know that either.
Silver's associated with.
It makes sense because it's a very silver light that comes, like a
yeah.
very cold light that comes off of it. So maybe it's like a fear, like a primal fear embedded within the creature
Right.
because of what it does to the person to get them there.
It seems like a very popular potential origin was there was a animal back in the 18th century in 1767 called the Beast of Gévaudan. It's a French name, so I apologize. But it was a terror of an animal that, terrorized the area, and there was a hunter who supposedly killed it with silver weapons. And that is what I'm seeing to be widely regarded as the first first mention of silver and wolf adjacent creatures being touched on. But apparently, in recent memory, the movie The Wolfman was what popularized the actual silver bullet kills werewolves.
Gotcha.
Ah,
Like a hunter with flair.
right. I mean, I bet you that's what that hunter did, right? Right? Where it's like, oh, I had all my weapons, but now I got my nice set.
Yeah.
And so it's got silver on it. This is my nice hunting set.
Right,
And they
right.
went out, hunted with their fancy set. People are like, whoa, that's what you need.
Yeah.
You need the silver.
I also think there's something to it where you're making a movie, you're telling a story about a wolf man. You can't just be like, yeah, I went out back and shot it with my just off the rack shotgun. Like you have,
1,000%.
you almost have to embellish it. So maybe it was just an embellishment that stuck.
I agree.
I love the
Because then-
moon
Because
thing,
then
though.
it's like, well, shoot the damn thing.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like,
Nuke 'em.
well, no, it has to be a silver bullet.
Right. It can't be that easy.
Well, it's like, it's not impossible to come by, right? It rides that
Could
middle
you-
line.
You imagine a 3-minute film where the guy's like, he transforms, and then someone's at their home, just watching Price is Right. The door comes busting in. He's like, "Oh my God, honey, a wolf." Movie over, credit rolls.
Dude,
What the heck was that?
I think about that like every other movie I watch. I'm like, what if he just didn't make that jump right there?
Right.
You know what I mean? Or
Movie just ends.
yeah.
Ugh.
Or maybe they just did stay in the house.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't go in there. Why are you following the entity that's beckoning you? All
Right.
that sort of stuff.
That's want to make movies like that. Where just after 5 minutes, it's like, it's haunted. All right. And
How
then
horror movies should go.
driving away and it's
Yeah.
credits.
That's awesome. All right. Well, that has been 3 top tier movie monsters
I mean, yeah.
and their historical kind of
They're way
origins.
up there. I mean, generations have known about these
Yeah.
monsters.
But I'm
Movies,
sure.
books.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure there's some floating out there, Task Force. So as always, hit us up with those recommendations. If there's anything you want to hear us dive into, if there's any other information that we might have missed, let us know. Love to dive into
Oh, we
that.
should do like foreign, like movie monsters, like The Grudge and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Ooh, that one. Oh, that one's freaky. Okay. Yeah, I love that. Just like kind of the origin of how an entity like that can exist. But
yeah.
with that said, don't forget to mark your calendars. September 22nd, we got Red Web, The Case Files, a show on YouTube and the Rooster Teeth app coming to you. The first one, fan theories from your favorite episodes as submitted by you guys. We
You guys are
dissect them and talk.
smart.
You guys were on it for this one. Some things we didn't cover, some new information.
Right.
I want to go ahead and tease this. Somebody had some anecdotal experiences that actually shined a brand new light on one of the cases, the mystery soda machine. So very eager for you all to hear about that one. Oh, and also September 22nd, just while you're here, we've got ourselves a Red Web coin. If you ever need to make a decision between 2 scary items, an owl and a catfish, we got a coin that you can flip and make that decision happen.
But just so you know, there's one side is definitely more terrifying than the other. There's just no debate about it.
Right.
You have
The
to pick
owl.
a side because
Right.
as you know, when you flip a coin, it lands on one side. It doesn't just land straight
Right.
up. So there's no like, whoa, I'm in the middle.
Well, if you flipped a
Task-
coin and it lands on the side, you need to send us a video of that.
Right. It just okay, maybe you're in the middle then.
Yeah.
But look, pick a side. all
Pick a
right?
side. But yeah, otherwise, Fredo, I'll see you right back here next Monday for another mystery.
Oh no, I spilled my ointment. Oh!